I got given this short film to edit with out of focus shots, bad exposure, basically no coverage to work with, inconsistent lighting, and worst of all, the DP shot the whole thing on his iPhone and now expects me to be the hero and make it all look great. Now admittedly, I was the cinematographer, and this is for my new short film, Witchfish, on the channel here. But here's how I elevated my subpar iPhone footage in post to get a final result that many people told me they couldn't believe was shot on an iPhone, using creative elimination, lazy coloring tricks, and a whole grab bag of my secret sauce tips and tricks that I'll run through at the end of this video. So take notes, lots of great tips in this video. Let's jump in. So here's the finished timeline for Witchfish. It's actually pretty complicated for a 3.5 minute long iPhone short film. I didn't clean it up too much. I wanted you to see what it actually ended up looking like. I was moving really fast on this thing, but even still, I do have the music at the bottom color coded differently. I've got the sound effects mostly in the middle, and production, dialogue, and audio is like the top 2 or 3 tracks of audio. Let's jump into the actual edit now and the choices that I made, and I'll break down all of the stuff that's going on in this timeline. The first thing I want to talk about is creative elimination. And when I say creative elimination, that's a phrase I just made up, but I'm talking about the pacing, I'm talking about the tempo, and being creative to eliminate things that are slowing down and hamstringing a scene in the film. For example, this scene right here, I wasn't really happy with how it was turning out in the edit because I didn't give myself much coverage. I only got this over the shoulder and this POV shot through the cabinet. When I got to the edit, I realized, oh, to show everything I want to see, like I want to see these ingredients, I want to see the funny faces and reactions she's doing. I mean, clearly this is the more interesting shot of the two. So I want to hold on that as much as I can. But then if I do that, I don't see the ingredients ever. So then in the edit, I was going back and forth and back and forth. Of course, if you cut back and forth between the same 2 shots too many times, it starts looking really clunky and like it is what it is, which is I just didn't have enough coverage. It also slowed down the scene. So instead of letting it play out in real time like I originally intended, I started looking for ways to speed it up. And that's very important. Don't let weak scenes linger, okay? Every scene has to earn its runtime in your film. So get creative if you're in that situation and see if you can cut a scene like that in half. If you're able to cut a weak scene in half, it'll often play twice as strong simply because it's keeping the story moving quick, even if the contents of the scene aren't the most amazing. And in the end, I decided, okay, the shot where she opens the cabinet, it's too strong to not start from right here. I also like her grabbing the Tabasco, so that's gotta stay. And then I just did the bare minimum to get out of this scene as quick as I could from there. And that meant at the end, instead of showing her pull each ingredient down, just jump cutting through them. So she pulls one, jump cut, she's pulling another, jump cut, she's closing the door. And then we cut around to this outside. Again, it's just a more impactful transition to end the scene from inside the cabinet, because then we jump out here. It just stronger cut.
Ooh, a little kick. Couple rotations.
And of course, I helped those transitions along a little bit with some sound design. So I kind of amped up just the little sounds of her grabbing the Tupperware containers and a little whoosh for the door closing. It just helps move it along. It makes it feel more intentional and less like, you know, a YouTube jump cut like this. You know what I'm saying? The same thing happened with this scene where she's tossing in ingredients. There's a lot of good stuff in here that I wanted to keep, but I was limited in my options in the edit because I only got coverage from these 2 basic angles. I've got this shot looking up at her, and then I've got this over the shoulder shot of the sink. And I realized again in the edit, if I cut back and forth between these 2 shots too many times, it's gonna start looking cheap and clunky. So instead of doing that, I just did the same thing as I did in the cabinet scene. I found a way to incorporate jump cuts without it feeling cheap or accidental. And that earlier decision to introduce that jump cut style in the cabinet scene actually made this one work way better, since now it's already established in the stylistic canon of the film. Again, I looked for ways to help it out, especially the first jump cut, which is gonna be the most jarring one. So for example, she tosses in this worm. I added this little flare effect, which is from some, you know, light flare pack that I have. I also put this white matte over the scene with a overlay blend mode on. And that just gave it kind of a super bright, almost like a flash of light hit through the room. And then a couple frames later, there's the actual jump cut right here, and I just did the same thing, but I let this be on normal blend mode so that it's filling the frame with flash. Light. And again, since we've already established it, since I just did a jump cut a few seconds ago, I can do it again here a little more blatantly. She tosses the tongue and then she's doing the Tabasco, and you just get away with it because it's so established by now. But it doesn't have to be jump cuts, it can be anything, but just the idea is don't linger on the weak scenes. Don't be precious about this stuff. Like, you're trying to tell a story, so just move the story along. Like, this scene was so much longer in earlier edits of the film, and it was just dragging the whole thing down. It wasn't bad by any means, but I didn't want not bad to be the bar that I was aiming for. I wanted it to be like, everything is propelling us further on, and once you actually start watching the film, it's gonna be really hard to turn it off because I'm constantly thinking like, okay, is this gonna be really fun to watch right now? If not, then how can I make it really fun to watch? And creative elimination will just get rid of anything that's not meeting that threshold for you. Obviously, when you're working with iPhone footage, color is gonna be a huge thing to try to elevate this. And let's take a look at what this looked like with all the color turned off. So this is what it looked like starting out. Obviously very flat. This is Apple log format, which we shot using the Blackmagic camera app on the iPhone 15 Pro. Now, if I do a Rec 709 conversion, it looks like this. So this is basically what we were capturing. Hey! Oh my God, Louis just knocked one of my lenses off the counter. Bro, no. We don't like that. That could have been an L series. Thankfully, he knocked the cheap one off the counter. You're still cool. You're still cool. I have no idea what I was talking about. Log? Apple log? Okay, so yeah, before, after the Rec 709 conversion. So this is basically, you know, I haven't put any stank on it yet, but we're gonna wanna put some stank on it. And I knew shooting on an iPhone, I was gonna have to do a lot of post-color work to give it a distinctive look and get away from kind of the deep depth of field iPhone stuff that can just look really too sharp, too boring, not cinematic. So here's what we did. Now, I'm not a colorist by any means, and I've said this in past videos. I just used Premiere, I used Lumetri color. I haven't gotten into the nitty-gritty of Resolve and node-based coloring, like proper Hollywood coloring workflows. It's a bit of a rabbit hole that I'm just not quite ready to dive into yet. So I do the lazy coloring method of using Film Convert Nitrate, the sponsor of this video. And here's where we ended up just throwing that on. And as you can see, it's already looking pretty wild compared to that Rec 709 conversion on its own. And let's dig into what's actually going on here a little bit. So let's recreate that look from the ground up. I've just thrown a fresh Film Convert Nitrate on here. And you start by choosing your camera. And the power of Film Convert is that they've analyzed the sensors of all the most popular cameras. You'll see all these brands here, and you dig even deeper. You choose which model of camera. For me, it was the iPhone 15 Pro, and what picture profile. So I was shooting an Apple log, hit apply, boom. Already we're looking so much better than the stock Rec 709 conversion, right? And that's because you can apply all these different film stock looks directly to the footage. They all have their own flair. The black and white ones are really cool. I haven't had a chance to do something with them yet. And what I landed on was actually this Kodak P400 Portra. So this kind of emulates Portra film. And the first thing I did was bring the exposure down just a hair. I thought I wanted it to look dark, spooky, and this was maybe a little too Nickelodeon. And if I pull up my Lumetri scopes, I can get an idea of like how much room I have to play with. Once everything's dancing on this bottom line, there's no room left. And I brought it down about half a stop like that. And now we're starting to get a little spooky. I think I also brought the temperature up just a little bit. I also have the halation feature for Film Convert, which is really handy for certain shots. I didn't need it so much in this film, and I'll show you why, but it just gives you your edges of your highlights kind of a glow that emulates the film stock even further. So if I turn it on here and I boost it way up, not that much, if I boost it up to like there, you can see, and I can even view just the halation, that some of the highlights are getting this kind of glow. And I don't really need it for this shot, but I'll just keep it on like subtly, something like that. Down here, we have some more nuanced controls. These color wheels will let you adjust the shadows, midtones, and highlights separately. So I think in this, I might just bring up the shadows a hair. It is looking a little too muddy, a little too dark, but also bring up the highlights just a bit. And really, this is doing something very similar to just adjusting the exposure, but I just kind of do it as I go down the options here. I'm pretty happy with this. This is like a really solid base. And when I was editing the film, I was mostly just doing this for each shot, but we can push it a little further. So the next thing I did to, again, elevate this iPhone footage is I threw on Lumetri color and I put that above film convert nitrate. And the only reason I'm even putting this effect on is because I just want to use their vignette. So I'm just gonna go negative, I don't know, 0.6, just like a more subtle vignette. Before, after, I mean, the after just looks cooler. It's kind of framing our subject more so we focus more on her, and it just adds a little bit of darkness and creepiness around the edges of the frame, so it works well for a story like this. But believe it or not, we're still not done. We can take this one step further, and I did using Film Convert's new add-on called Hazy. And what Hazy does is it emulates like a black pro mist filter or any kind of misty filter and gives your image a little bit of bloom, a little bit of softness, and really takes away that digital feel even more. Now you could just use a black pro mist filter on your camera, but I'm shooting with an iPhone. I'm not trying to add a bunch of accessories to it. I want to take advantage of the small shape of the iPhone, and using something like this, so handy. So I'm gonna go black pro mist, sure. Let's pick our color space group, Apple log, black pro mist. One thing that's important to note is you're gonna wanna put this above film convert nitrate, and that's gonna give you much better results. So this is where we're starting from, and there's not a very noticeable difference right now, but that's because we're only on 1/8 filter strength. I put it up to half. So this is before and after. You really see it on this highlight right here. It starts to really soften and glow, and also on her hair and some of the other highlights throughout the shot. It's a pretty subtle effect, but very useful. And there's more controls down here. I could click into like white balance and change the color of the haze that's coming off this. And when I was done, I ended up with this. And as you can see in the hazy filter, I actually pushed the white balance way over, which just gives it a bluish glow to the whole thing. And I pushed the exposure, so it kind of brightened up some of these softer areas. But very fun effect and really good for something like this where I don't have great footage to start with, so I'm gonna put as much stank on it in post as I can and try to create an aesthetic after the fact. And this shot was a great example. It's just a boring close-up of a faucet. Turn on film convert nitrate. It is looking pretty good. I mean, the strong highlight up here is nice. And then turning on the vignette. Okay, we're getting there. It's looking pretty cool. But then check out how Hazy takes it to the next level. Whoa, we got this big glow. It's suddenly looking more cinematic and really nice. Same with this shot when she popped up into frame. I had an idea of what I wanted to achieve here. And if we look at the raw footage, it looks pretty bland. Turn on film convert nitrate. Looking pretty good, looking pretty good. Turn on the vignette, looking slightly better. But then I went crazy with the Hazy and ramped it up really hard to give these highlights just this huge glow because I wanted it to feel like, you know, suddenly we're in this beauty dream vision, and it really worked great.
That's what I'm talking about. Being fun.
So giving it that intense color treatment throughout the film helped a lot, but that wasn't enough because there were some shots like this where the exposure was just not great. I couldn't create enough contrast in the image because I didn't have like negative fill. I ran out of light stands. There was a lot of reasons why I couldn't do it. Oh, I'm not that great of a cinematographer, but you can fix a lot of stuff in post. Let's look at this case. Now, if you can see it, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 layers of video for this single shot. Why would I need that many layers of video? Well, let's take a look. Here's what the shot looked like straight out of camera in Apple log. After putting film convert on it, I kind of pushed the contrast a lot. I wanted it to be dark on this wall here. I wanted this to be bright, this light through the window. But that left our subject looking super dark, not bringing our eye towards her at all. So then we got this second layer. What does this layer do? We've brought up our actress. And how did we do that? We created what's known as a power window, folks. So I basically duplicated this first layer of video with all the effects intact, and then I just created a mask in the opacity section right here using this pen tool, which just lets you boop, 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 and draw a mask, and now you're only affecting that area of the frame, right? So I've got a mask just over our subject who doesn't move very much in the frame, so very easy to do. Feathered it out, about 80 pixels, and then I just simply brought up her exposure a little bit, and that lets us actually see her expression and keep the frame looking balanced the way that I would have liked to have gotten it in camera. But we're not done there. I wanted this to be very bright up here, so I added this third layer with another power window on it. As you can see, a power window on a window. So I brought up the exposure there. I added some extra heavy hazy just to that part of the frame, and probably some extra halation too. It's hard to see, but it's up there. So that's looking good, but now we've got this big yellow spot on the wall right here, and it looks like it's almost clipping, but it might just be that there's too many color effects going on and we're getting this weird splotch. So that's what this fourth layer is. This is a power window on just that part of the frame, and it looks like I just brought down the exposure there so it's not so hot in that spot. And then we have an adjustment layer, and that is just zooming into the frame slowly with the transform effect and a keyframe at the beginning and a keyframe at the end, slightly zoomed in. And all that dancing around in post gives you this.
I brought you.
And there are power windows galore in this film. For example, the books on the bookcase here, off, on, POV shot through the water, brought up exposure on her face. And I had to do a lot of dancing around like that in my shots because it was so hard to get the lighting, the framing, everything right when I also had to act and stand in frame. So as you can see, before power window, after power window, just brought down the exposure, but tried to keep the exposure of this super dark background somewhat intact. This was one of the tougher setups of the film for sure. And right now, Film Convert Nitrate is running their Black Friday sale, which means it's the best time of the year to get Film Convert and start lazily coloring your films the same way that I do. Plus, you can take an additional 10% off using my link in the description. Thank you, Film Convert, for sponsoring this and making my films look so good. Let's get into my secret sauce grab bag of other tips and tricks to spice up my footage. At every moment, you want to be asking yourself, is this the most fun it could be for the viewer, or is there a way to elevate it and push it a little further and surprise and delight our viewers? And if we look at the previous edit of the film, here's an example of that. You know, she's just pouring the Tabasco into the sink where she's making her witch's brew. Now that in and of itself is kind of funny because she's not using like eyeballs or tongues. She's just using like a normal food ingredient here. But what if we push it to the next level? And when I saw the face she was making, how excited she was to be pouring that in, I was like, there's gotta be something we can do here. If there was some kind of reaction from the Tabasco sauce, and that's why I added these sparks in. And that just makes it so much more fun. And that was so easy to do. I have an Artlist membership, so I just looked for some welding sparks and pulled these stock clips and set the blend mode to screen, scaled them up a little bit, put a bit of a blur on them because they're in the foreground, and then there you go. Add some sparking sound effects. Very fun. And I thought the same thing when she dunks her head underwater here. This is the older version of the edit, and I was just cutting between two different lighting setups for the same shot. Kinda worked. But I was like, I feel like I should push this further. This needs to really be like a set piece in the film. So I just went back on Artlist and I found a few stock clips of creepy stuff, like a close-up of a snake. There's a close-up of a bunch of snakes. This really creepy girl. This thing. This dude with fire. This shot. And I just threw them on top of the footage, sped them up a ton, added a blend mode, like this one's got lighting on there. And then they kind of come in and out of the frame, integrate with it, and it's almost like vision she's seeing, I don't know, but it just amplified the whole thing, boosted the production value, and just made it a stronger, crazier moment. And here's a couple of quick fixes I did for some very common, just straight up mistakes that I made. So right here, we have the witch walking by, lighting up the candles, but do you see all this flickering going on? That is from this light bulb. Unfortunately, sometimes you get flickering from different lights, and it's good to catch in camera if you can, but if you can't, there are ways to fix it in post now. Actually, if you have the studio version of DaVinci Resolve, there's a built-in deflicker effect that will knock this out immediately. I didn't have the studio version at the time, but fortunately a plugin I already had also fixes this. I used the Neat Video Reduce Noise plugin, which is the best way to also just get rid of that video noise from shooting at high ISO on your camera in post if you're not using DaVinci Resolve Studio, which also has that feature built in. I slapped that on, and it's a little complicated. It's a bit of an expensive plugin, but the number of times that it's completely saved my ass with really noisy footage, with flickering like this, it's been totally worth it. And once it's applied, no flicker at all. Beautiful. And then maybe an even bigger problem in Tony's close-ups here, I completely missed the focus. Sometimes it was hard with the iPhone to get it to really lock focus where I wanted it to. There's a little bit you can do to massage that. Like, she's not super out of focus here. So if you apply this effect called unsharp mask, which I have here, and then create a mask for the unsharp mask around just the subject's face or whatever you want to get in focus, it will, artificially sharpen the edges a little bit. And you just play with the settings a little bit, but look at the before and after. So I'll even zoom in a little bit. This is before the unsharp mask and after the unsharp mask. So you can just see, especially around the eyes, which is really the main area you notice it, it just kind of artificially simulates it being in focus a little bit more. And you have to watch out for this because it'll also create more grain in the area that you use it, so you can see the grain kind of comes to life in your face. But fortunately, I have so much grain from the film convert nitrate film stock grain anyways that you can't tell, and it looks really natural. And I think that effect was just enough for me to get away with this shot. I can't even notice it as being out of focus when I watch it playback. And lastly, one of the biggest tricks I always use on my own films to boost the production value, it's not really a trick at all, it's just sound designing the hell out of the film, which is what all these green little clips are. They're all little sound effects and ambiances and transitional sounds designed that just amplifies what you're seeing on the screen, makes it more cinematic, larger than life, more fun to watch and listen to, and it makes the visuals just look better when everything sounds super crisp. I don't know why, that's just how it works. But sound design is way too big of a topic to go into in this video, so check out this video to learn more about how I sound design my films from beginning to end. You'll love it. And if you haven't seen Witchfish yet, I'll put that right there. You'll love that too. Thanks guys, see y'all next time.
Oh, a little kick.